What's up, guys and gals of the movement world? Sean Mishka, Football Beyond the Stats in Week 17 of the 2021 National Football League season, and our movement play of the week. This week, we have another rookie. We've had a few of them here over the course of 2021. It's a rather stat class, and really at the cream of the crop of that class happens to be the guy that we're going to break down and analyze today. One of his three touchdowns from the big game against the Kansas City Chiefs and his Cincinnati Bengals playing the Kansas City Chiefs this past Sunday. Before we do that, I want to wish everyone out there a happy new year. May you and yours obviously have a blessed 2022. And I have a feeling everyone out there will have bigger and brighter things to look forward to here after that, which what we've been forced to adapt to over the last 2 years. So hopefully everyone is safe and healthy out there, and we're looking forward to a bright 2022. Part of that 2022 will actually be a couple of National Football League weeks or games. Most of you who follow the National Football League probably realize that typically this would have been the last week of an NFL season. Typically 17 weeks with 16 games. This year, 18 weeks with 17 games. So we actually have one after this. And then next week, I'm going to be releasing our all movement team as well. The following week, our mover of the year and some of our other all movement awards. I have a feeling that the guy that we're looking at today, Jamar Chase, number one of the Cincinnati Bengals, rookie wide receiver, is going to be finding himself on some of those all movement team in awards at the end of the season. And it's for very, very, very good reason, as we're about to find out today. If you haven't really been following the story out of Cincinnati with Jamar Chase, it's a really cool one simply because last year he opted out. The Bolitnikoff Award winner from 2020 elected to realize like I put enough on film, a lot like Micah Parsons, linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys. Both these guys ended up opting out and not playing last season due to COVID. So that actually adds a little wrinkle here about some things that we should think about. Jamar Chase, LSU wide receiver, ironically enough, was there with Justin Jefferson, current Minnesota Vikings wide receiver, as well as with their quarterback here, number 9, Joe Burrow. And in fact, when we really look at that, that creates another little wrinkle for us to discuss and investigate, particularly in regards to shared affordances, the relationship, the chemistry that exists between Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Obviously, 2 years ago, they at LSU, he being Jamar Chase, was the best wide receiver in college football, at least as far as statistics are concerned. 84 catches, 1,780 yards, and 20 touchdowns. And obviously, he has carried that over into this game at this level, which is pretty extraordinary to think about, to hit the ground running this early. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows either. After having the year opt out, he came out and had some struggles early on in camp, particularly with catching the football. He found himself dropping the ball a little bit. And there's some things that I've talked about over this season as to why that might be the case, particularly in regards to the optic flow that is being created and the information from a different ball. So there are some things there that a player does have to get accustomed to. Also, having not played for a season, there's some lack of calibration to the information in the world, a lack of attunement or sensitivity to the information in the world, as well as reduced intentionality or reduced openness and responsiveness. That takes a little bit of time, exposure, and experience to regain, to sort of recalibrate one's movement system too. And I think that's what we found from a Jamar Chase early this season. But again, we can't underestimate his chemistry with Joe Burrow, who's kind of coming on late season here. In fact, I think the cool thing that Joe Burrow said after their record-setting, or particularly Jamar Chase's record-setting game this past Sunday against the Chiefs was, F it, Jamar is down there. I'm going to throw it up knowing that number one, Uno, is down there. And I'm going to go and give my guy a chance, particularly with the capabilities that Chase has with 50-50 balls, but also his acceleration in yards after the catch. There is no rookie wall here. In fact, and that rookie wall being that time where rookies late in the season, particularly in December, when they're not accustomed to playing in games 14, 15, 16, and 17, where their college season, even at a place like LSU, where they won a national championship and went late into the season, um, typically we see players hit that rookie wall. But because Chase was off last year and had to take some time to recalibrate, I don't think we're seeing that rookie wall in the same way we would with other first year guys. I should make a mention here from an individual and organismic constraint standpoint. Jamar Chase is obviously a really plus athlete, really plus athlete, an exceptional athlete at the combine last year, 4.34, sub 4 second short shuttle and a sub 7 second L drill to go along with just pure burst and explosiveness. Vertical jump of 41 inches and a horizontal or broad jump of 11 feet even. So we're seeing a guy who has rare explosive capabilities. And we're going to see that on display here today from a game speed standpoint. Ironically enough, I went back and looked at a few of his scouting profiles, a few of the things that people were saying about him. And yes, people rave about the acceleration, but some people discussed him not having the same type of game speed as maybe we're seeing being displayed right now. So it'll be really intriguing and interesting. Now, I admittedly, as I have admitted before, I don't watch a lot of college football, so I had to watch a few of the highlights. And, honestly, as far as yards after the catch are concerned, short distance acceleration, even route running at that level, I didn't see anything that stuck out as far as being glaring gaps or weaknesses. And Jamar Chase is showing us, because he is the favorite to win the Offensive Player of the Year here, or Offensive Rookie of the Year, rather, that he's not really having those issues getting calibrated to the game at the National Football League level. Environmental constraints here on this respective game. It is a playoff-like atmosphere in Cincinnati. Obviously, we can see that there's winding down to the end of the first quarter. If you look down here for me with you. So just 2 minutes and 12 seconds left in the first quarter, but the score is already 14-0 with a favorite Kansas City Chief team coming in and kind of all this pizzazz around these two units and the Bengals and the Chiefs facing one another late season football. It has a playoff like feel, and especially as late season playoff feel as you can get in Cincinnati, because it's been a minute since they've been relevant at this time of the year. Overcast conditions, cold. I think it was right at freezing, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, real feel of 25 degrees. Those things certainly would impact or influence skilled players who are reliant on speed and speed qualities. Obviously, surface may change, even though they're at home here. When temperatures start to drop, humidity changes. Obviously, it's going to change the traction or the footing. Now, again, you may say to yourself, all players are dealing with that, all 22 on the field at a given moment in time. That is certainly correct or accurate. But again, the more dexterous movers are able to sustain or keep stability or flexible adaptability within their movement actions, even when environmental conditions, particularly weather, might influence how we would usually move. So key performance inhibitors there, weather, key performance inhibitors as far as pressure and anxiety. The Chiefs are accustomed to behaving like this. The Bengals, not so much. So we see the score, we see the time, we see sort of what's played out. And Joe Burrow, who's coming off of a huge week, the previous week, 500 plus yards, Bengals franchise record, I think the fourth most in the history of the National Football League as far as a passing yardage total, is going to his rookie wide receiver and trusting him to make a play for him at a time that they desperately need it. And obviously, this was just the start of things. Like I said, this is his third touchdown on the game. Or excuse me, his first touchdown of 3 on the game that he had, and he ended up with a 266-yard performance. So obviously, he was more than finding his way. Ironically enough, as the game played out, and I did leave the video of every catch that he had in the blog post, and you'll find it up above in the video section. look at that and look at the nature of not only how he's performing, he being Jamar Chase, but also how the Kansas City Chiefs elected to present problems to him. I think they probably should have gone away from that, which what they were doing a little earlier on, but instead they chose to leave him. Maybe with a lack of help over the top, and when they did bring that help, there were a few mental mistakes on the Kansas City Chiefs defense part. So into the play here. Let's see. We're going to watch it in its entirety as we typically do. And then we're going to highlight some things that I think we're going to find. Jamar Chase, number one, again, out of the slot. And you may or may not have already seen this play. See him put that world-class for football acceleration on display. Let's go ahead and watch that from the beginning again. Again, what we find here, obviously, the Chiefs playing a relatively soft zone, and they just let Jamar Chase go find some spots in that soft zone, and that will sort of play into that, which what we're seeing from him. We're going to see some disarray here on Steve Spagnuolo's defensive coordinator for the Chiefs. His part. Let me see if I can find some. We see Chase doing his Justin Jefferson impersonation and gritting on down the celebration line, and I'll just let that play. We're seeing a kind of a new age of wide receiver here, a new wave of pizzazz and swag. I hate this Tony Romo vision, even though I love next generation stats for numerous reasons. But what we're finding here is that it might get a little messy, and I think they're showing their true maybe the things that they're focusing a little bit too much time, attention, and effort. They being NFL next generation stats, often oriented around speed, as opposed to, and now granted, relative speed or relative velocity values, particularly between two players or multiple players, can be a key candidate control parameter for guiding the regulation and control of movement behaviors. However, things like interpersonal distance, which we typically highlight, things such as the layers or levels of these problems, I believe, contain more specifying information than if we just look at relative velocity values. But that's a topic for another day. So let's go ahead and go at our playback speed of 50% as we typically do, and let's walk ourselves through some of the things that we see unfolding as we analyze this. Obviously, like I mentioned, number one in the slot here, we can see him. If you, let's see, you can see him moving out into the zone coverage right there with that red dot, and you're going to see him sit in that soft zone. And again, this is where the shared affordances really come from. Now, Joe Burrow is playing in a place, Joe Burrow being obviously right here, the quarterback, playing in a way and place, a form of life that is really confident. And when he's throwing to his guy, he's even more confident than if he's throwing to even the other exceptional receivers that the Cincinnati Bengals are currently operating with. So we see him sit in this zone. And again, when I'm talking about that shared affordances, just to kind of come back to it, it's the perception, the information detection about how someone else could move or is moving that affords me, or in this case, Joe Burrow, to behave in a certain fashion. These shared affordances are happening, of course, with relationships across the field, but we can become sensitive and attuned to that. And if we've had a lot of experience, a lot of exposure, a lot of reps behaving in relation with our teammates, this is what we're going to continue to find. And of course, Jamar Chase just being a rookie, Joe Burrow just being in his second year, this relationship is only going to become more solidified, barring obviously injury and things like that. So we see, again, slow motion. I want to kind of fast forward to a place where Chase is receiving the ball. And I want to just highlight a few things, if I could, for y'all. Obviously, we got a problem here that has a disadvantage to Jamar Chase in this situation. We see Chiefs surrounding him. This is really what I would refer to as deep waters of complexity, numerous interacting component parts within this problem that bring a certain intensity or amplification of information. There's a lot coming at him, even though he's in this zone. And when I say this zone, he's in the middle of this soft zone that obviously is being created. If I can get my spotlight. Tyrann Mathieu, obviously perennial Pro Bowler, former All Movement Team member, a guy here in Bolton who has been playing exceptionally well. A guy that I know, Mike Hughes, 21, who used to play here for the Vikings. You can see them all surrounding him. And at the surface, the moment that he catches the football, which again, remember for a receiver or a tight end or a running back who's catching the ball out of the backfield, when they catch the ball, that's the most specifying information first and foremost. The ball is obviously vital in a key informational source. But once we catch the ball and we go into evasive agility mode, now all of a sudden we have to think about the problem and how it's unfolding in this reciprocal nature between the changing states of organization of the problem and the solution or the solver organizing a solution to said problem. So we see again here, at least at this moment, it's sort of a 1v4, but he has a couple of teammates, 87 here, and then he's got another wide receiver down here who doesn't seem to be, he's obviously running vert. But what we're going to find is first and foremost, as he catches the ball here, we're going to see some interpersonal distances that inform him. Oops, if I could get back, I hit us a little bit too far ahead there. Let me get back. Bear with me. I know I asked that a lot of all of you. Okay. The moment he catches the ball, and I've already NFL Next Gen stats this. Okay. He's got Bolton here. And Bolton is an interpersonal distance of 8.7 yards, obviously closing ground. And he being Chase, obviously has his perceptual gaze as he catches the ball, at least briefly sensitive or attuned to the movement behaviors of 54. And 54, as we're going to find out, is based on the affordances in this landscape that present themselves and beckon Chase to move in a certain way, invite Chase to move in a certain way, become very, very important. He's got Mathieu also crashing down, sort of in a, well, we can already see Mathieu here. Okay, remember, behavior affords behavior. He's kind of gotten himself over pursued, thinking that likely Chase was going to come back in this direction where you see me moving my mouse. So if we look at his behavior now, he still has time to functionally, flexibly adapt and adjust. But at this moment in time, he's a little out of position to present any sort of issue here to take away this huge green gap of green space that we got calling him here. Now, we also can't see what's behind the problem. And we're going to get a little bit into that as well. One more thing I want to mention, obviously, Mike Hughes being back behind him. I know I'm getting arrow happy here. Mike Hughes is only 7.5 yards away. I say only because obviously problems change quickly. Affordances emerge and decay really rapidly in the National Football League, as we've talked about before. So when he catches the ball at this moment in time, now, granted, he probably is sensitive to and fixated upon 54 Bolton in his interpersonal distance between the two of them. But also, so if we're thinking about what he's attuning to and adapting around, he is able to pick up velocity now from Bolton in a very short period of time and try to determine a time to contact potentially if he were to continue moving. And he's obviously going to continue moving, as we're about to find out. So there's a few options, especially when he quickly and rapidly turns after having taken in this quick gaze, this quick glance at where 54 is and how 54 is behaving. So I want you to watch number one's movement mannerisms, his movement behaviors, to see what's unfolding, to try and determine what is he perceiving, what is he intending to do, what decisions he's making, and ultimately how he's organizing his actions in relation to this unfolding problem. So we see him move and he immediately turns, knowing that this angle, and this is all, again, purely speculative, right? We see the angle, the pursuit angle of Bolton to try and close that ground, time to contact. Jamar Chase trusts this is where the action capabilities obviously come into play. His extraordinary world-class for football acceleration, short distance acceleration capabilities. At this moment, when he turns, based on what he picked up from 54, he believes there's going to be the space there to be able to exploit and exploit quickly. So he's going to not only perceive that gap, but he's going to select to act upon it and ultimately begin to act upon it. However, remember, problems change quickly, affordances emerge and decay. So when he turns, this gap affordance here that could potentially be calling him, especially when now we can't tell for sure if, let me get this arrow out. I can already see I'm getting pretty arrow happy. Okay. He, he being Chase, is perceptually connected to this huge space of grass, right? I mean, we see obviously look at look at this huge space. And he's already got the first down on 2nd and 7, but he wants to make more out of less here. And especially with this complex problem, essentially at this moment, a 1v3+1, because there's going to be a guy back here. Not sure if he's able to connect to him. My guess is, again, the more skillful, attuned mover can look deeper into the problem, gather and detect information out there. But now, out of his periphery, okay, let me make sure I have my other arrow. Out of his periphery here, he's likely able to see and pick up exactly this. To his right, Bolton isn't a threat yet, even though he may be able to kinesthetically feel him, if it were to be my guess. But I am also guessing that he can pick up either A, color, or B, feeling, or C, actual body mechanics, depending on how wide and skillful his degrees of freedom are perceptually here of Matthew. Okay. So we're going to find that, obviously, if you remember back with me, Chase has a couple options here. Okay. And he just trusts in that acceleration, takes two really quick, rapid steps, and just goes along for the ride from an adaptability standpoint, realizes this gap is here. It's beckoning me right now. I'm going to accept it, and I will adapt later if I need to. And he has to. So 2 steps down on the ground, and Bolton closes that gap in space. Now, this is where we must obviously have some qualitative, subjective speculation, right? If we rewind back, I believe, again, it's him and his action capabilities. Remember, we perceive to act, act to perceive. So our action capabilities do matter, and our calibration to the world and to its problems of those action capabilities and our ability to apply them is really what game speed is truly about, right? And for whatever reason, Chase doesn't trust once that second foot hits the ground and he looks back over right here. We can see him look right over at Bolton. He looks at Bolton and realizes now he doesn't have to get really a high resolution of information from 54 here. All he really has to gather is that guy going to close the gap? Is he going to hit me? And there's a certain degree of both online in the moment and perspective, meaning what's going to be unfolding in the future state of affairs that are informing his decision making here in his functional adaptability. We can see that second step go down into the ground. Matthew is essentially a non-issue for him right now, even though he knows he's there from his previous information detection. Tyrann Mathieu, one of the more adaptable guys in the league, not that adaptable when we're talking about, at least in this scenario and situation, to be able to close that gap. So I don't think this threat was that which kept him from accepting this respective affordance. Instead, what I believe happened here is he didn't believe, he being Chase, did not believe that Bolton wasn't going to close the gap or be able to take him out at his feet or at his knees or worse, right? So that would be, again, my speculation. And then we see him put on this nasty move by putting on the brakes. He sees 54, perceives 54 late, adapts in an alive fashion, and then moves and navigates, slipping out of the way, as we saw in plays in the last 2 weeks. In fact, we saw one 2 weeks ago with Jonathan Taylor. We saw one last week as well, where guys are contorting their body. They're acting to perceive and perceiving to act, and it's all in relation to it, but they're flexibly and adaptively adjusting on the fly. Slight nuances. The only way to train that, guys and gals, is in context. You have to have problems that look, act, feel, and behave like this. I promise you. Okay. So he moves and navigates around this, gives himself just enough room here. As we see, I mean, that step, we're talking about not only high braking forces, so again, action capability, but the ability to just continue to move on problem to problem. These nested, successive affordances, right? How you solve one problem determines how you're going to solve another. It could also be, I do want to make this speculation that when he turns here, now this is highly speculative. I know I'm belaboring this point, but it's important here. When he looks downfield, he's not only seeing this green grass, guys and gals, he's seeing 17.6 yards away. Okay, if I can bring my other double arrow here, 17.6 yards away down the field here is say a deep safety. Again, 17.6 yards is a lot, but depending on what he picked up, remember, affordances are individual dependent, as we've already talked about today, as well as numerous many times in the past, but also frame dependent. So depending on what he saw Thornhill doing, number 22, deeper in the problem, that may have factored into how he combines these information sources between 22, Thornhill back here, deeper in the problem, and 54 and what they're doing. Important here because this will relate to how someone is coordinating and controlling and regulating their movement. Once he gets past right here, this move, just nasty, he now is able to see, hey, I got some buddies coming, or at least I got one buddy coming. So even though this movement problem obviously is still a pretty complex one, not very much distance here between these two individuals as Jamar Chase is going to go east to west. This is a pretty complex movement problem. And now, right here, if you look back behind this, you can already see the foot and knee. I'm just putting a bunch of stars there so you don't miss it right off screen at the 50-yard line. We see Thornhill closing space and closing distance. Imperative and important for what we're going to see emerge, right? Because we can kind of see, if I can clear those out, how he is positioned with that left leg a little forward into a lunge spot. Now, granted, Chase isn't seeing him just right now, but we have to think how and what did he pick up before if we're going to speculate and put ourselves into Jamar Chase's human movement system. He sees now, though, and is able to pick up 87, his own tight end, which creates this 2v6 plus one. Okay. There's white and red jerseys everywhere, right? But now Jamar Chase has to trust in that elite level acceleration capability and not only outrun the chasing defenders, pun intended there. I know it's not that funny, but Jamar Chase has to outrun the chasing defenders. He trusts in these action capabilities as he turns this corner. He also trusts that his guy is going to assist him in that manner. So look at as soon as he picks him up, again, behavior affords behavior, but it's not just behaviors of opponents. It's behaviors of all humans. So he picks up the behavior of 87 right here, and he realizes that's going to be my calling card when we're talking about getting past and getting through and getting downfield further and getting past Thornhill, number 22, coming there. So he trusts in his action capabilities, that perceptual peak there that we see of him with 87. He locks in on him and he's like, I'm going to follow him. Boom. Turn the corner, curvilinear fashion, and I'm going to hit the gas pedal. We got a lot of bodies, right? Not only do we have Thornhill back here somewhere, and we see, if we look at 87, he's looking at a bunch of different guys. He's looking at Matthew. He's probably also looking here at Bolton, and he's probably looking back here where I got my star already at Thornhill, knowing where he's about to go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a chaser, 6 as a chaser, and 7 as a chaser. But we're talking about, again, world class for football. Notice every time I say that about acceleration and speed, world class for football, for American football, on the field, game speed. And he's about to outrun the Chiefs defense, right? As we saw earlier. A few things that I still want to show you, even though watch him hit that gap. And now he not only hits that gap, but in the street racing world, they call that gapping him, right? He just gaps everybody. But a few things that I want to show y'all that are still important that go along with themes that we've talked about. Perceive to act, act to perceive. We see a slight perceptual gaze pickup over his shoulder and then a number of times right here Look at him already starting to turn over his left. He can feel a chaser. He wants to make sure that if he has a feel of it, it's either haptic or more so kinesthetic. It's just kind of a sixth sense of a perceptual feel. He knows a guy's back there, right? He's got to see how close he is to him. He gives that quick look, realizes that guy's not a threat enough. And then again, he gives another one over his right shoulder. And look at as he looks for those guys and picks up those threats and picks up that specifying information, it changes his movement path ever so slightly. Okay, pretty cool stuff. Obviously, as we find every given week. So if we fast forward to the other view as the two college teammates celebrate, gosh, I wish this Tony Romo thing could get off the screen. As he's just about to draw a bunch of squiggly lines. And that is essentially what happened, but not quite to the same degree of accuracy as hopefully our analysis is breaking down. But let's look at a few things here. Again, we're seeing interpersonal distance. We're seeing movement behaviors. We're seeing perceive to act, act to perceive. We're seeing affordances, which are individual and frame dependent. That's why I always say we got to put ourselves in the human movement system of the athlete himself. And I want you to kind of relish again. I do want to give props to our guys over at Highlight Heaven for posting this video. I apologize, I'm going in and out of the video itself, but let's as we're winding down here, let's get back and see this and hopefully pause. Again, affordances, individual and frame dependent. When are they seeing them? Who is seeing them? And how do they have the capabilities of acting? Specifically knowing that Jamar Chase's movement form of life is all about that early acceleration gas pedal, but he has some capabilities to move in really functionally fit, really attuned, really adaptable fashions in an evasive nature. And we see zero hesitation there as he goes out and hits that gas pedal. And then we truly see how those interpersonal distances and that gap between them starts to play out. Okay. When it comes to what we would do here, remember I said earlier in regards to the deep waters evasion. I know these last couple examples that we've had in previous weeks, it isn't really rocket science as to how we might be able to train this in context and develop and acquire these types of movement skills. Notice I said acquire. We're not trying to replicate or we're not trying to make it identical. We are trying to replicate in a representative fashion. I do a lot of, again, with wide receivers catching a ball in space, tight ends catching a ball in space, or running backs catching a ball in space, where they may have what I would refer to as the deep waters of complexity. Within a 10, 15-yard window, they are surrounded by 2 to 5 defenders. In this case, obviously, as we mentioned, there's 4, at least at this particular moment in time. So you could replicate this. Okay, not trying to prescribe behaviors, but allow that affordance landscape to present itself to your offensive skill players. Doing deep waters evasion, where you're changing complexity, you're changing the nature of the problem and allowing them to solve said problem in their own unique, authentic fashion. I'm going to show you kind of what I would do. Usually it would be from the inside hash to the sideline, that type of workspace width. And then usually, I should have drawn that more so right on the 35, but then, so hash to usually, if depending on exactly what it is that our session intention is, particularly for this player, this workspace size would be 25, 30 yards deep or long. And you can really do that at your discretion. This is how you would develop acceleration or speed, long speed in context. Just make the problem in the workspace longer, but don't forget about opponents. Okay. So as we obviously made the mention, if we're going to do this as really true deep waters, we got to have multiple opponents surrounding and converging upon an offensive skill player and letting them go solve the problem in their own unique and authentic fashion. Allow them to sense and perceive interpersonal distances, relative velocity values between those opponents, orientation and where those opponents are, where they are in relation to him, the deeper opponents. So they have to continue to perceive, to act and act to perceive in accordance to that. Again, this is really not rocket science, guys and gals, when it comes down to developing or prescribing or setting a movement problem that would ask certain things of offensive skill players in very similar fashions as to what we see here. And then we let the guy self-organize. Okay. Find those gaps, exploit those gaps. We can bring teammates into the mix. So even though it's deep waters, doesn't mean that we can't get a teammate involved. Again, usually it's a 1v for me, 2 to 5-ish, and then sometimes a 2v 5-ish type of numbers and scenarios and situations, and then let that guy go solve. So, guys and gals, obviously, I'm always trying to do here within our movement play of the week is not only try to unpack what the players themselves, how they might be skillfully attuning and adapting their movement solutions to meet the unfolding problem, but to give you an arm inform your practice design and inform your problem setting within your own unique, peculiar environment. So hopefully that was helpful. Obviously, as I mentioned every single week, if you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button. Like, subscribe, comment, do the works. We have only one more week remaining here as we wrap up week 17 of the National Football League season in 2021. And then also next week, we got a treat for you coming with my all movement team, and then our all movement and movement awards, and ultimately our mover of the year, which I haven't fully decided what format I'm going to put that out in, but it's one of my favorite things to do each and every year. And we just might see Jamar Chase yet again. Thank you, guys and gals. I'll see you again in the last week of the 2021 National Football League season.